There is so much to discover in Elden Ring's DLC, from weapons, talismans, new Larval Tears, and plenty more, with many of these items being well hidden, or just downright easy to miss during your run. So, in this video, I'll be showing you at least 25 hidden free gifts you can pick up across the Shadow Realm. Now, let's dive right in. First up, when arriving at the Graveside Plain, kicking off the DLC, before heading north to the Scorched Ruins and NPCs beyond, head east, along the opposite direction of the path, through a forest laden with stone structures, before coming out to the Church of Consolation. There's a few nice buffs here, especially for earlier on, including 2 Shadow Tree fragments at the base of the beheaded Marika statue, and a Blessing of Marika potion inside the cave just behind. Something created in an attempt to heal Mesmer, but to no avail. It will fully heal us, mind you, though annoyingly isn't reusable, so definitely worth saving as an utmost final resort if you're almost about to kill, say, the final boss. Additionally, you'll want to defeat the Black Knight, located here, in order to obtain the Black Steel Great Hammer, adorned with the Erdtree's Grace of Gold, and coming equipped with the Endure skill, to temporarily reduce the damage of incoming attacks and boost our poise. Also, performing guard counters with this will unleash the Erdtree's Grace of Gold with an explosion of holy damage. Very worth grabbing for heavier builds, but worth coming down here regardless at the start of the expansion. Back up to where most of us will first arrive though, the Scorched Ruins has a few secrets of its own. Amongst the lower rubble, we can pick up the Greater Potentate's Cookbook, one for crafting hefty firepots, and we can also find the hefty pots that we'll need. Climbing to the top of the ruins though, on the eastern side, we can open a door to find a chest containing the item Blade of Mercy. Not a weapon, but rather a dagger talisman, which raises our attack power by 20% for 20 seconds each time we land a critical hit. Now, canonically, this was used by the Hornsent to end the suffering of those beyond saving with honor and dignity. And though it's become broken after years of use, it's now, presumably through all of the lives it claimed, acquired a spectral aura. After arriving at the Three-Path Cross, head west towards Belurat, but then take an immediate south to arrive at the Cliff Road terminus. Just beyond here is the ruins of Prospect Town, a place now overrun with Bloodfiends, seemingly cannibalizing one another as part of some bloody ritual. You'll want to kill them, first of all, to obtain the Bloodfiend's arm colossal weapon, but then head to the building at the very top and open this chest to loot the Outer God Heirloom, a talisman capable of raising our Arcane by 5, and which I find especially useful whenever needing to bolster Arcane to use certain items. Though, the main question I had with this heirloom is which Outer God is it referring to? And I think this actually tells part of the tragic origin story of the Bloodfiends, saying that the clan who lost everything in the Great Fires peered upon the corpse of their ancestor, normally an act of sanctity, and saw in its shadow a twisted deity. The clan had suffered such torments that the horrible thing was taken as an object of worship. Now, this would imply that a clan, presumably of Hornsents, were tricked into worshipping some horrible outer gods, taking advantage of their defeat at the hands of Mesmer. But again, which outer gods? Well, if we look at the Bloodfiend Hexa's ashes, located in a dungeon at the base of the Templetown Ruins waterfall, they will read that, long ago, a subjugated tribe discovered a twisted deity amongst the ravages of war, and they were transformed into Bloodfiends. The Mother of Truth was their savior. The Mother of Truth, also known as the Formless Mother, is the outer god that Moog also served, and it was she who transformed these presumably Hornsent, though there's no trace of horns now, into the Bloodfiends. This would explain their ritualistic consumption of blood, their use of blood magic, and of course ties back to the heirloom's bolstering of Arcane. Arcane, of course, being a stat which directly improves bleed buildup. So, now that you probably know the story of the Bloodfiends, if you haven't already, go and get the heirloom. With so many new weapons and playstyles to try out though, that's going to require a fair amount of respecking. And if you've exhausted every Larval Tear from the base game, luckily there's 9 more to find in the DLC. All of them can only be obtained at night and exist in the middle of these blue glowing spirit stones, fairly noticeable from a ways off. The first can be found just south of the Scorched Ruins, here, then back up to Prospect Town, a little to the east, just here. Then the third is right below the abandoned Ailing Village, literally next to the Grace Site. 4 is on the eastern side, between the Pillar Path Waypoint and Tower of Suppression, just there. Then the next is just below the Church of the Crusade on the Shadow Altus, with the 6th just east of that, past the encampment outside the Shadowkeep, surrounded by some bears. 7 can be found on our way to the Templetown ruins, near the Spirit Spring, just behind the attacking Archer Giants, with 8 beyond the Templetown ruins, not too far outside the Scorpion River Catacombs, just here. And finally, number 9 is a little north of the Manus Meta Cathedral, just west of the Church District High Road Grace Site. So, go forth, sweeting tarnished. Time to be born anew. 9 more times over. Back at the ruins of Prospect Town though, the next place you don't want to miss is to the southeast, past where we just picked up the Larval Tear, through the forest of lightning rams and around this hill, where, through a tunnel to the other side, is the nestled away Church of Benediction, meaning literally the Church of a Blessing, wherein we can find the blessed Blue Dew Talisman. It's much akin to its counterpart from the base game, speaking of how the Erdtree used to drip with sap like the Shadow Tree still does, only this one slowly regenerates FP, not HP. And I tend to find equipping these fairly useful during longer stints of exploration. But that's not all we can get here. If you're a fan of the armor worn by Needle Knight Leather, then up here, dangling over the edge, is the same full set of Oathseeker armor, minus the white cape. And the Pater fist weapon also serves as a sort of elongated arm blade, kind of like an Assassin's Creed blade, but not really. What we can learn from the armor though, is that Leder once set off on a quest of discovery, searching for somebody to pledge an oath to and to serve in lifelong devotion. Whom she would have found then, of course, was kindly Miquella, and this would further explain her devout loyalty to him, remaining so even after Miquella's magical charm is broken. Next up, this one is very simple to grab, but is a sorcery I simply missed for a good long while. Located just above the Charo's Hidden Grave Site of Grace. Ride immediately east, across this pool, and then back up and around, and located amidst this Shrine of Gravebirds is the Rings of Spectral Light Sorcery, a spell which summons these ghost flame-like figure of 8s, which then fly off and seek out the nearest enemy, inflicting both magical damage and frost buildup, said to have been practiced by the Keepers of the Spirit Graves, here, where all death ultimately drifts. Now, below Charo's Hidden Grave is the beautiful blue-flowered Cerulean Coast, the actual beach of which we can travel around to reach the Finger Ruins of Rhea, a huge fingerprint-shaped structure comprised of giant fingers, finger creepers, and these almost serpentine things called lampreys. We'll be sent here as part of Ymir's questline, but one area that's very easy to miss can be accessed by heading down into the Finger Ruins, but then taking this western passage back up into the blue flowers, coming around to a grove known as the Finger Weaver's Hovel, where we can find a ghost who seems to believe that ringing the bell at the center of the ruins shall result in them becoming sweetly cradled at the bosom of the Exalted Mother. A piece of foreshadowing, again, I suppose, for Ymir's quest. Also here, though, is the Finger Weaver's Cookbook 1, allowing us to craft the glinting nail item, which serves as an imitation of the same sorceries sold by Count Ymir, so mostly working as a non-magical alternative of that spell for lower intelligence builds. The Fissure, where we'll eventually go for Tiolier's quest and to fight the Putrescent Knight, holds in its depths a sword. And to get this, you'll want to start from the Fissure Cross Side of Grace. Head towards this tilted stone coffin and drop down to the hidden ledge below. And travelling along here and into a little cave, watching out for the congealed putrescent blobs, make sure to pick up the Velvet Sword of St. Trina, an awesome looking and very powerful item, due to its ability to inflict not just sleep, but eternal sleep, likely due to its recent exposure to St. Trina herself, and being coated in her much stronger deep purple cloud of eternal sleep. Using the ability both sends out a cloud to proc this effect, but also coats the blade for a short time, allowing our hits to build up the effect of sleep. It doesn't work on everything, and some enemies will just straight up die from damage first, but for select fights and bosses, it can utterly trivialize them. Enemies hit by this will not wake up for anything, and can afterwards just be left or, well, I suppose, pommeled. Here's a couple items in Castellensis that I missed on my first go of the place. As you come out of Moonrathol's quarters into this courtyard area, be sure not to miss this ledge left of the ramparts here. Dropping down, we can climb up onto these rooftops and then drop down to the other side, where hanging over a ledge is the Glintblade Trio Sorcery, described as a more refined form of the Great Blade Phalanx spell used by the Troll Knights. Not only that though, but dropping off this ledge will bring us into a room below where Moonrathol is, and in this chest we can loot the Wolf Crest Shield, a strength scaling emblem of the Carian Royal Covenant, particularly proficient at defending from sorceries and serving as a symbol of the moon's pride, presumably brought along on Renala's journey to aid Messmer as a reminder of her homeland. Okay, so whether this next one is technically free is debatable. The items themselves are free, and they unlock things that you can pay for at the Twin Husks. I'm talking, of course, about the new bell bearings, and there are 7 of these discoverable around the Realm of Shadow, not including those from NPCs, whose quests I won't spoil here. And pretty much all of them need to be shot off the side of cliffs with a ranged weapon like a bow. The first is found again at Prospect Town. In this little ravine here is the String Seller's bell bearing. Now, you get 3 guesses what that one unlocks. The next can be found at the southern end of the Alak River Ravine, a ways south of the Alak River Cave Grace, and this unlocks toxic and white flesh mushrooms. The other mushroom bell bearing then can be found at the top of said valley here, and unlocks the standard and red flesh varieties. The Herbalist bell bearing then is kind of above that valley, along the ravine heading towards the Dragon's Pit, which unlocks Rudder Fruit. Then, if you want unlimited fly mold for crafting poison or scarlet rot pots, that can be shot down from literally standing at the Recluse's River downstream side of Grace. North of that though, sort of on your way up to the Manus Meta Cathedral, past the Fire Giant, is the Greasemonger's bell bearing, for crafting things named after a popular musical. And finally, the Spell Machinist's bearing can be found on a corpse atop Rabbath's Rise just north of there. Only to get to the very top does involve dropping down from behind the Shaman village, which I'll explain in a little more detail in the Jolan and Anna Ashes chapter. But before that, it's on to the Shadowkeep, and this first item can be found right by the Storehouse First Floor Grace, but is hidden behind a mountain of ancient Haunsent texts. The Haunsent apparently recorded large amounts of their knowledge on stone tablets, and thanks to the better nature of Messmer and his Fire Knights, it was decided that this knowledge wouldn't be wiped from history, but rather kept within a gigantic library in the Shadowkeep itself. A mark of more civilized crusaders, I think. So, through a narrow passageway here, behind the Grace to the right, is the entrance to a secret chamber, laden with tables and holding the now best Boltdrake Talisman in the game, negating the effect that lightning damage has on us by a full 22%. Excellent when facing up against the likes of Dancing Lions, Ancient Dragons, and plenty more. Into the upper Shadowkeep now, and heading back down from Messmer's Dark Chamber, across the stone bridge and down these stairs to the right, dropping off onto a hidden ledge here, where we find this non-hostile guy just chillin', loot the corpse behind to obtain the sorcery Impenetrable Thorns, the same attack used by the Shadowtree avatar throughout that fight, firing thorns at us through the ground to both damage and stagger opponents. Now, this sorcery is said to be employed by those who abandoned the practice of incantations after devout faith rewarded them with only despair. The image of the twisted shadow tree is an edict: denounce their ways, do them harm, for they have abandoned us. If you want more lore on the shadow tree and its avatar, then I highly recommend that you check out this video that I've previously made, with the avatar chapter timestamped around the 33-minute mark. One more thing in the Shadowkeep though, and this one could be picked up around the corner from the Storehouse side of Grace, the side that we access from the Church District. Before heading up the ladder though, continue around this corner to face a bunch of fire ghosts and one of Messmer's knights, beyond which is the Carian Thrusting Shield. Not the most hidden item on this list, I grant you, but one with some interesting lore implications. For one, we know from the description that this shield was once wielded by R'hllana, the twin Moon Knight night during her sole entry into ritual combat, a demonstration of fidelity to the Erdtree. And perhaps after that, she could have exchanged her shield for a second blade, imbued with Messmer's flame. But the shield's presence here would at least suggest that R'hllana has spent some time at the Shadowkeep. We already know that she was referred to as the Sword of Messmer, and from the sounds of her remembrance, was maybe even unrequitedly in love with him. Now, I don't want to be that guy, but well, a Carian thrusting shield to me could possibly imply that Messmer has invited R'hllana over for some, let's call it impaling and chill before, which gets a little bit creepy when we consider the sheer volume of serpents that this guy is constantly accompanied by, though the shield is pretty cool, as it can both protect and attack. Turtle talismans. We've had one, yes. What about two-headed turtle talisman? Something which boosts our stamina recovery speed just that bit more than the first one, 22.5% as opposed to 17.7% for those more relentless fights where you could really just do with recovering more quickly. To get this, you'll want to head to the Templetown ruins and to the waterfall immediately south, where, thanks to some gravestones sticking out here, we can drop down to the base. The same place we find a mushroom bell bearing, in fact. And for once, those classic gamer instincts are actually going to come in handy. Because yes, this time there is a hidden cave behind the waterfall, where you'll want to quickly rush in, grab the talisman, and leave before getting attacked. Now, in such a rush, you may not notice the actual turtle, or let's be honest, it's a tortoise, just chilling in here. No, it doesn't have two heads, sadly, though it does seem a particularly old being, sporting this kind of aged hair and a crown of, it seems, crucible-imbued horns. Presumably, the thing's been hiding out here for millennia, and in my headcanon, the humanoid who died in here with the talisman was on a quest to find the real two-headed turtle. A quest which I will now pass on to you guys. If anybody has found a real two-headed turtle/tortoise in Elden Ring, then please comment it below. Otherwise, enjoy the talisman. Don't you just love it when basic respawning enemies are so aggressive that they feel like mini-bosses in their own right? Those Hornsent Divine Bird Warriors, for one, can be a real pain around Belurat. But what have I told you? That there's actually one we can recruit for our own arsenal. From, again, the Templetown ruins side of Grace. Head north just a little bit up here, and look right to see a Spirit Spring. Ride it up into this ruin, and loot the chest for some beast horns. Just a decoy of a prize, really, because the real one is hidden along a secret tunnel behind. Through here will be a small chapel of sorts visible from below, inside which are the ashes of Divine Bird Warrior Ornis, a spirit from whom it appears many of the other horned warriors are descended, clad in golden armor and granted wings and feathers by divine invocation. Ornis succeeded in taming the divine bird and made its wings his own as he soared through the sky. When he finally fell to earth, he lived on as the guardian deity of the Temple Quarter. So it seems in a similar way that the dancing lions are composed of the channeled spirits of lion divine beasts infused with the power of the Crucible, divine bird warriors are a similar deal, albeit channeling the power of divine birds. Presumably the same ones that grave birds are derived from, given we can find them all over Hornsent ruins too. But this wouldn't be the first time that humanoids are said to have had wings. Because up in the Rao Ruins, travelling northwest from the Rao Ruins East Grace site where we fight Crucible Knight Devonia, heading back through the underground temple tunnels will be some ancient routes, infested with fly people, but atop here we can pick up the fine feather Crucible Talisman, something that actually makes backstepping a pretty effective dodge method, but also increases our damage taken by 15%, basically helping you screw up less, yet making it worse if you do. Backstepping, by the way, is basically pressing dodge without moving in any direction, and requires a certain degree of calm to ever even utilize, I think. Said to be fashioned from feathers embodying the aspects of various creatures, this talisman suggests that such feathers also grew on the human body long ago, an evolutionary gift from the Crucible, much the same as horns. though the only signs we see of this in-game come from the manflies. Hornsent afflicted with some agonizing disease, with the pain only ending with their death and subsequent metamorphosis into flies themselves. We do know that those who treated and buried the afflicted weren't afflicted themselves though, which is interesting, suggesting probably that there's some divine will at play here. And I would guess, given that fly mold can be used to produce rot pots, that it may have something to do with the rot god. After all, Melania too sprouts wings. And perhaps before being sealed away at the Lake of Rot, the rot god would bestow its worshippers with wings. Though that's a theory for another video. If you saw my video on 10 bosses you definitely don't want to miss, then you already know this secret pass in the Rao Ruins. The Grand Stairway is accessed by dropping down to the left of this elevator up from the west side of Grace, and across the ramparts is another elevator to access the second Dancing Lion. Before doing that though, head around to this extra bit to find some Inquisitors and one of these little square tunnels, through which is a chest containing the talisman of all Crucibles. This comprises the effects of the Fine Feather Crucible Talisman that we just picked up, alongside the Standard Feather Talisman to improve dodging, the Scale Talisman to reduce crits, and the Knot Talisman to reduce headshots. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Well, not so fast, because the caveat is that this talisman also increases our damage taken by a huge 45%, essentially begging the question, how confident are you in dodging standard attacks? Still worth picking up though, and said to be the mother of Crucibles in ancient tower lore, rumoured to have sprouted upon the giants, perhaps explaining the potential reasoning behind Marika's crusade against the fire giants, suggesting maybe that they were as deeply embedded with Crucible worship as the Hornsent. So this next item is kind of a 3-in-1 and comprises of a total of 3 separate locations, housing altars for the stone-sheathed sword, Sword of Light, and Sword of Darkness. And whichever altar you visit first will bestow you with the sword. The subsequent 2 will then allow you to transform it. We can switch between Sword of Light and Sword of Darkness as many times as we like by returning to their altars. So I'd recommend making your first altar the one that's the biggest faff to get to, as you then won't have to return to it, and that one is down in the Fog Rift Catacombs, in the second segment of the dungeon, above this large room containing 3 spike traps. You'll want to come to this balcony at the end, wait for the trap to drop, and immediately jump into this box. Exit at the higher level, don't miss the Blinkbolt Ash of War, and then travel along the top of the spikes, bringing us to this hidden room with an altar which for me is the Sword of Darkness, since I went to another ruin first, so don't make my mistake. After having done that though, the order of the next 2 doesn't matter quite as much. One is located at the Ruins of Unte, which we drop down to from the Shadow Keep by laying in a classic stone coffin, and this church will initially be blocked by a decommissioned furnace golem, which we'll have to reawaken by tossing a hefty furnace pot directly into its furnace, opening the way to the altar right here. And finally, back in the Ruins of Rao, the last one is located in an isolated tower. To get here, simply use the Spirit Spring over here to jump up to the platform opposite. And if you've seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, then yeah, it's one of those bridges. Just have faith and try and stay in the middle. The Sword of Darkness will send out a spinning flurry of holy AoE damage around us, whilst Light similarly sends out beams and infuses the blade with additional holy damage. And again, you don't really have to make a choice here as to which one you want, as you are free to switch back and forth an unlimited number of times. Another item found in the Rao Ruins, only this time it's accessible via a less conventional method. And to get here, you'll first want to start in Castle Ensis, where, heading along the ramparts shortly before reaching the elevator to R'Lana's chambers, head into this little tower and loot the chest for the Imbued Sword Key. This can be used just outside the exit to the castle, turning right in Shadow Altus and down into this sort of river, waterfall, island holding a waygate. Unlocking it with the Imbued Sword Key will be transported early to a contained region of the Rao Ruins, home to a divine bird warrior, and further inwards an ancient Hornsent statue of a maternal-seeming figure. Perhaps just an embodiment of the life-bestowing Crucible, but I would wager she represents an outer god worshipped by the Hornsent. This This is because the item at her base is the Verdigris Discus Talisman, made of the same metal called Verdigris, worn by Moore, and said to be the gift of an outer god. Enormously hefty, yet supple. Sounds a bit like lead to me. In fact, the talisman goes hand in hand with the Verdigris armor set by reducing our damage by 10% when at heavy load, or 20% when over encumbered. So potentially good for heavier style builds. Though I'd love to hear who you think this Verdigris bestowing outer god may be down in the comments. There's a ton of cool Ashes of War found across the Shadow Realm, and just like the base game, there's a good handful which drop from killing tier scarabs. So here's where to find all 6 of those. Firstly, Piercing Throw is in the southern Shadow Altars, hiding amidst these little ruins next to the ruined forge of Starfall Past. A fairly easy one to spot when in the area, but one that disappears very quickly. Next, across the bridge northeast of the Bonnie Village, in the woods heading up towards Manus Meta, is a scarab you'll want to defeat for the Raging Beast, Ash of War, an awesome downward slash attack applicable to the Beast Claws. Then, around the other side of Manus Meta, heading along this path from the Church District High Road Grace, in a cave at the end, look up to obtain the Carian Sovereignty Ash of War, transforming our sword into a giant magical slash attack akin to what Rolana uses against us, perhaps even left here by Rolana herself after her teachings from Ymir came to an end. Fourth can be found atop the eastern hillock of the encampment outside the Shadowkeep, where floating high in the air will be the Rolling Sparks Ash of War, applicable to perfume bottles. Then, a little north of the ancient ruins base, on the way up to Telu's ruined forge, with a good leap from Torrent, take down this scarab to loot the Scatter Shot Throw, another option for throwing blades, summoning multiple copies of an armament for an AoE attack. Then, finally, along the Scorpion River, just south of the Ravine North Grace site, is the Poison Flower Blooms Twice Ash of War. My personal favourite of these, though one that's best not used around sheer drops. So hopefully, at least one of those is useful for your build. If not, then enjoy the treasure hunt. Here's a way to double the number of allies summoned by one of your Spirit Ashes, but to do this, you'll first have to complete the questline of Count Ymir, so jump to the next timestamp if you don't want that spoiled. After the quest is over though, we can find Jolan, leant against her pillar in the church, and first of all, we'll have a choice. Presenting her with an Iris of Occultation will shut out her light, and grant us her awesome Sword of Night, which you may prefer to have, but does lock you out of the other bonus, that being Yolan's Ashes, obtained by instead giving her an Iris of Grace, bestowing her with the Grace of Gold, and turning her into an Ash for ourselves. Only, it doesn't quite end there. You see, the Tower of Rabbath's Rise, just to the north, contains a secret that we can use to upgrade this Ash, but first, you'll have to make your way out the back of the Shadowkeep, and into the hinterland, up into Marika's old shaman village, and riding to the back of this place will be a hidden path that drops you back down into the very top of Rabbath's Rise, where we can find the puppets of Yolan's lost sister, Anna. And after interacting with it whilst holding the ashes, we can finally reunite the two and double our spirit summon. Or again, you can instead bypass this whole thing and take the sword. It's up to you. Okay, so this next one is fun to get to, has a few more good items along the way, and potentially huge implications on the lore. So, starting from the Spiral Rise Grace, head up the stairs and defeat this Inquisitor to first stop its annoying attack. Ditto with the one down below. Then drop down here to these stairs, drop again onto this ledge, and then carefully wander along here and around this corner, grabbing any items that you see if you want. Drop down again to another ledge before finally dropping into this larger area. Defeat the giant spider scorpion, and be sure not to miss an additional Shadow Tree fragment. Then come into this sort of temple room and take the elevator down, bringing us back to Upper Belurat. Follow the stairs down again, past a Divine Beast Warrior to another elevator, bringing us finally to a bridge above the Poison Lake. Across here, through the big double doors, will be our fantastic prize. Referred to as the secret treasure of the tower, Euphoria is a twin blade symbolizing abundance, and says that though the blades, fashioned from golden shoots, are largely wilted, and darkened, their luster can be restored by dealing damage to foes. However, damage dealt to those who live in death will have no such effect. It comes with this awesome vortex spin, effectively conjuring a lasting vortex to repel oncoming attackers, which is charged up by dealing damage with standard attacks. And I also have a theory as to what this weapon was, and why it's now wilted, not dealing damage to those who live in death. I think it's clear by now that the Hornsent did definitely worship someone, or probably multiple deities. These statues can be seen all over the place, often being worshipped. Verdigris is described as a gift from an outer god, and this room in particular seems very holy, paying homage to at least 3 different figurines. This wooden sculpture off to the side then shows a larger being, carried as though in a funeral procession by 6 hooded figures. Now, in the cinematic trailer, we see Marika pull some golden braids from a dead figure, using them seemingly in her ascension to godhood. Though perhaps they're not necessarily golden braids, but perhaps the same golden shoots from which this weapon is fashioned. Quite simply, I believe this being to have been a Hornsent deity that Marika killed, and the Euphoria poleblade to have been their weapon, or perhaps something even fashioned of them to commemorate them. Then, the lack of effect on those who live in death would further suggest that Marika properly killed this being, using the Rune of Death on it before it was given to Malekith. Now, it certainly requires some further looking into, but comment below any ideas or holes in this theory that you can see, and maybe we'll revisit it in the future. And hey, maybe this being could even be the Glowmide Queen. What do you think? Another hidden item in Enir Ilim though, albeit one far less convoluted to reach, can be found again near the Spiral Rise Grace, heading up and onwards in the other direction this time, along the basic route to the Gate of Divinity, until we come across the first Divine Beast Warrior en route. And behind where it spawns, you'll want to jump across to this platform, head down the ladder inside, and in the rooms below are several boluses, and more importantly, the Horned Warrior Ashes. Not as ancient or prestigious as Bird Warrior Ornis by the sounds, but hey, worth grabbing all the same. For our second to last entry, there are 3 paintings around the Shadow Realm, all of which can point us to an additional prize. Here's how to get them all. Firstly, the Incursion painting can be found to the west of Prospect Town, on the hill just above the Church of Benediction. The Incursion painting depicts a view not too far to the north, near the Ghost Flame Dragon at the top of the gravesite plain, and approaching the spirits, it'll drop the Serpent Crest Shield. A finely made relic, excellent for guarding against fire, said to have been made to commemorate the beginnings of the Crusade, started by Messmer. Second can be found inside a cave a little north of the Scorched Ruins, depicting the Sacred Tower before it was obscured by shadow. And only after burning the Sealing Tree this time, the accompanying spirits can be found by riding a spirit spring just northeast of the Temple Town ruins near the Archer Giants, heading behind the northern Nameless Mausoleum, where we can get the same view as seen in the painting. This one drops the Spiral Tree seal, and as you can guess, this one especially enhances spiral incantations, picked up around various Hornsent settlements. Finally, painting 3 is located in the Secret Passage, which brings us down to the ruins of Unte. Down these ladders, off the Shadowkeep courtyard, in the same room as the Hidden Passage painting. And this one will direct us to the Jagged Peak, where, from the mountainside side of Grace, travel southwest to the Spirit Spring, but rather than riding it up, jump onto and across this arch. At the end, a chair will materialize, and after about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, also a spirit. And this one will drop the Rock Heart, allowing us to fully take on the form of a dragon until death, boosting our resistances, damage negation, and of course strengthening our Dragon Communion incantations. It's an awesome thing to at least try out. You will have to unequip all of your armor first, and it differs a little from the Dragon Priestess Heart too, in the sense that her form instead boosts the incantations of the ancient dragon cult, not the Dragon Communion. Finally, our last item for today is a very simple one, yet easily missed, as it can only be obtained after defeating the final boss. But once you've done that, before going into a New Game Plus, make sure to return to the Garden of Deep Purple and pay a final visit to St. Trina. Her body now in its own deep slumber, whilst her soul, I would presume, is gone, along with her other half, though we can still obtain from her a parting gift. St. Trina's Blossom explains that her life withers withered and fell, as fleeting as the seasons. At her last, she left a single water lily, which provides a slight boost to FP of 6%. Despite the velvety purple hue, the flower is in no way poisonous. It merely blooms in quietude, depicting the sad abandonment of Saint Trina, cast off into the deepest fathoms of the Shadow Realm by Miquella to ultimately perish, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Now, let me know in the comments of any other obscure or cool yet missable items, and who knows, maybe I'll make a part 2 somewhere. Now, if you enjoyed the video, whether for the items or for the lore, then likes would help it out a lot. Subscribe for more Elden Ring, and as always, an extra special thank you to the patrons for going the extra mile to keep the channel alive. And if you'd like your name in these videos too, then be sure to check that out in the description. Thank you for watching, I'm Sam Bram, and have a great day.